Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and the Transformers are back, although this time in animated form. Transformers 1 it just hit theaters. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So there's a quote in this movie delivered by a wise mentor figure to a young Optimus Prime, in which he says, "What defines a Transformer is not the cog in its chest, but the spark in its core." And really, that's just a lesson that the Michael Bay kind of live action Transformers films just never seemed to grasp. For all the noisy spectacle and transforming actions, those films just felt so hollow and lacked all heart. And I do think sort of the stink of those lackluster films does still linger, in the air of pop culture, to the point that I was quite skeptical to revisit this franchise, even with I think, intriguing promise of returning these characters back to their more animated roots. But fortunately, with Transformers 1, there is more to meet the eye, because this movie is fantastic. I loved this movie for reasons that we will get into. I think with this thrilling action, beautiful animation, plenty of humor, and just a ton of heart, Transformers 1 is easily one of the best Transformers movies in decades, and I think is one of the most enjoyable films of the year. So the story of this film functions kind of as an origin story for the iconic Transformers characters, exploring in particular the relationship between Optimus Prime and Megatron, the best friends turned eventual arch enemies. And admittedly, it is a familiar, narrative path of travel. It does sort of invoke Professor X and Magneto in the X-Men series, or Anakin and Obi-Wan in the Star Wars prequels. I think, well, the story is not necessarily very subversive or full of surprises. It is executed to perfection. I think as a prequel, obviously, you know what the destination is going to be, but the journey to get there is just a total delight. And I'll say too, again, as a good Christian, I love people, that Jesus has called me to love, but the decision to strip this story of all humans and just allow the Transformers themselves to take center stage is absolutely for the best. Again, no one goes into these movies wanting to see humans. We just want to see cool Transformers, and this film definitely delivers on that front. And I think even for viewers that aren't heaped in decades of Transformers, mythology and lore, as I personally am not, this movie does unfold just as a very easily accessible kind of classic hero's journey, story where positive and wholesome themes just instill a sense of purpose into the very briskly paced action and captivating spectacle. And as with most animated films, it seems these days, there is no shortage of noteworthy actors and actresses lending their voices to the project, including Chris Hemsworth and Scarlett Johansson and Keegan-Michael Key, as well as many others. And I think they all do a fine job. They're all good, even if none of them necessarily stand out. But I think what Transformers 1 does possess that many other recent films just seem to have lacked is just excellent writing. I think kind of from the overall narrative arc to the individual scenes, or to the crisp dialogue within those scenes. This movie is just crafted really from start to finish with just a lot of love and attention. Because the movie has great pacing. It does sort of juggle the more emotional drama scenes, character building moments with the thrilling action spectacle in a way where it just never drags or loses momentum. I think thankfully, the film also does away with sort of the juvenile gags, the humor that largely defined those live action films, and also the more sarcastic, sharper edge humor that I think is been found in many other recent animated films, and instead just offers plenty of just genuinely clever, hilarious jokes and one-liners that I think will produce laughs in both the older and younger audience alike. The movie is also just a nice looking film. I think with better visuals than I expected from the movie's trailers, which just didn't, necessarily impress me a whole lot. I still don't think that the visuals will wow audiences the same way that the Spider-Verse movies did, or even shows a lot of inventiveness with some other animated films have done with fusing different styles and really breaking new ground. But I do think the visuals are good to look at, and they do effectively immerse you in the world. Even so, Transformers 1 is just not about the visuals. It really is all about the characters, all about the story. Because this film is just a ton of fun, from high-octane race sequences where they twist and turn through a futuristic city to the exciting first moments where the heroes first began to unlock their transformation powers, or a third act high spectacle battle that really utilizes each of the Transformers' unique abilities in creative ways. This film, really from start to finish, is just thrilling to watch. And thus far, this review has been almost gushingly positive, and hey, I think deservingly so. But if there is anything that might damper enthusiasm, at least for parents with younger children, I think that might be the tone, because the marketing material for this movie showcased, a lot of bright colors and goofy humor. But Transformers One really does push the limits of its PG rating. The film clearly wants to attract a young audience, but it's just not a movie that's made specifically exclusively for kids. I think it's more mature tone, makes it far more digestible for an older viewer than watching some, many other animated films. But it also leads to some content that I think some parents might not appreciate. For example, there's some unnecessary profanity, which we'll get into in a second, and just some darker, thematic moments. But I'm also aware that I am not necessarily the target audience for this movie, so I thought I would bring along a special guest to discuss the rest of this review with me. Well, look at that. The desk beside me just transformed into a very good-looking young dude. So this is one of my son's 9-year-old boys, Logan, and we saw this movie together the other day. What was your thoughts on this movie? Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, it was one of my the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, because do you remember what you leaned over? Partway through this movie, he leans over to me because I told him you're watching this as a reviewer. Remember what you said? You said this is a 5 out of 5 star movie. What was some of your things that you enjoyed the most about this movie?
It was funny, and then it's the you see the characters start at the bottom and grow into it. They you see in the Transformer show.
Yeah, I think you enjoy the fact that this is a prequel, and you do see the characters grow, and I think in some very significant ways. And we'll get into some of that with some of the themes that you see it. And this movie was hilarious. We were both we were laughing pretty hard, and even on the way home, we were talking about some of these jokes. So some good jokes. What about just some of the content of the theme? Because one of the things we did notice is there is some bad language in this movie, right? You noticed the
Several words.
Yes, and we weren't a big fan of that, right? Even though you like to swear a lot, you still weren't a fan of the.
No.
So we weren't a fan of that. What about just the tone? Because this movie, it's a bit more intense than some of the other animated films that we've gone to see together. Did you find it too intense, or was it scary, or what do you think?
No, it was good.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. This wasn't. It does get a bit darker, right? Like when one of the characters starts going evil, and he talks about wanting to kill his enemies, and you definitely see him go to the dark side, right? But nothing I think that is overly concerning. Yeah, and that's great. And I wanted to have Logan on just because I am aware I'm not always the target audience for this, and people of you will often ask me what do your kids think, and this is I think one of those rare movies that both of us were able to enjoy it equally the same. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, there is a little bit, I don't think a whole lot. Again, this is still a PG rated movie, even if it does sort of push the fringes of that a little bit. For language, like we just said, that's where the most of this comes in. Again, if you guys have been watching this channel for a while, this is one of my soapboxes. For me, one profanity in an animated movie is one profanity too many. And this film does have several, because there's a Transformer which refers to himself about 5 or 6 times by the nickname a bad Atron. You can fill in the blank there, as well as there's 2 uses of the word hell. And I think one use where God's name is used in vain. And I don't know if you caught, there's also a moment where a Transformer's getting ready to show the middle finger to another Transformer before being interrupted. As far as violence, all of the violence in this is of the PG variety, and because this film has no humans, it's all Transformers against Transformers. But Transformers are killed in a variety of ways. They're slashed and stabbed and blown up, and one of them is ripped in half. But nothing gratuitous or graphic in the way that is depicted. For sexuality, nothing in this movie for that. The only other thing that I can think of for content is there is a character, you probably caught it, where he refers to some of the Transformers as being false prophets, and Cybertron, which you might know better than I do, is the planet, kind of the sentient being that created the first Transformers and now serves as the planet that they live on. And the characters do speak about Cybertron almost as some sort of deity-like figure, although the film doesn't explore spirituality really in any depth beyond that. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface of this, and one of the things I always try to do, especially when we go see movies together, is use our car ride home just to ask, hey, what were the messages? What is this film trying to communicate? And you had some good insights for this. What do you think is sort of the main message in this movie?
It's you are given choices and you have to you get the opportunity to choose what path to go on. And you can either make the world a better place or make it worse.
Yeah, and that's exactly the theme that I saw in this movie. There is sort of that really about free will that we do, we can choose, and that our actions for good or for bad do, the consequences of those choices that we make, do impact the world for better or worse. And it really, this movie, it shows that in the two paths of the main two characters, right, of Optimus Prime and Megatron. Because what is Optimus Prime? What is his sort of motivation in this movie?
He's trying to fight, but he's trying to also be peaceful.
Yeah, he definitely wants to be really, especially at the start of the film, to showcase that he is special, that he can do more than just sort of be this lowly miner that he is. And but what does he lack? 'Cause can he transform in the start of this movie?
No.
No, so he can't transform. Which seems to be a obstacle for him ever achieving those desires. And really, like the quote I said at the start of this review, where the wise transformer says, what defines a transformer is not the cog in his chest, but the spark in his heart. And really, this idea that although he cannot control his circumstances and he lacks some of like the outer strength and like the transforming abilities, that he still has the opportunity, right, to showcase that he is like a noble hero inside. But what about Megatron? Because does he make that same choice?
No.
No, and I think that's what makes this film interesting is they both, right, they both experience the same things. They're both lied to. They're both betrayed by the bad guys in this, and yet they both respond to that in very different ways, right? You said Optimus Prime responds by trying to show mercy, trying to still be good inside. What about Megatron?
He's he's trying to kill evil with evil and fight with evil.
Yeah, very much. He wants to confront the injustices around him, really with more injustice, with more anger. If people are going to kill, he's going to kill. If they're going to be mad, he's going to be mad. Where Optimus Prime wants to sort of counter, like put out fire, not with more fire, but with water. And kind of at the end of this movie, a conversation between those two characters where Optimus Prime condemns Megatron, says, "We were given the power to change the world, and you used it to destroy it." And I think there's this, as a Christian, right? Jesus talked about that a lot. I think of Matthew 5:43, where he talks about, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. That, hey, life is difficult, the pain of being betrayal, and people can be, bullies can be bad, and yet God does give us the free will, right, to choose to respond in love rather than anger. And again, anyone that is tuned on social media knows that young or old, I think that is a very important message for us to let sink in. So in the end, we love this movie. I think you were maybe a bit more excited about this movie than I was. I wasn't necessarily super excited for it. I don't think you've seen the live action Transformers movies, so those didn't taint your opinion of what these movies could be. But at least for me, I think this is probably the biggest surprise of the year, right? Like, I think as someone who did find those live action Transformers movies like borderline unwatchable, just awful movies. I think Transformers One does infuse some very like much needed life into the franchise, and I think, like I said earlier, this is kind of a rare animated film that can be enjoyed by all ages. You enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We enjoyed it together. Really, the profanity is this sort of the one blemish in this movie, right? Like, I think for both of us, that's the one thing that just keeps this movie from being, a wholesale, totally enthusiastic recommendation. But I think despite that, I think with a very fun story, enjoyable characters, immersive world building, and just very exciting action, this film is a triumph. I think that does put the Transformers back on the pop culture map. I think whenever it's time for the Autobots to roll out, I will be happy. You will probably be happy to catch a ride and just be carried to whatever, wherever they go next with what I think is a very promising new series. But hey, would love to hear what you think. If you see this movie, you go with your kids, you go by yourself. Share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this movie as much as I did, if this sort of wiped away some of the filth of those live action movies, hey, don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let Logan know how much better at reviewing movies than his dad he is. So don't be shy about that. And if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys to subscribe to the channel, become a Collider, and get lots of movie reviews and a podcast and interviews and just other fun stuff. We'd love to have you be a part of it. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.